Hello and welcome to our sizzling hot June live question and answer session for Dressmaking with Philippa, and we are delighted to be with you again. We have lots of really great questions, lots of things that we haven't been asked in the past, so new information hopefully as always. So I'm going to just pass you over to David straight away so that he can welcome you and find out where you are watching us from.
Hi everybody. So first on the list tonight I think was Sarah Runicles. Hi Sarah, we've got a question from you tonight. Ali P, hi Ali. Joanne Tissington from Northern Alberta, Jackie Peters from sunny Hertfordshire, Susan Jenkins, who says that she's watching from her motorhome on her phone because she forgot her iPad. And I think you said the same thing on Tuesday night, Susan. So that's unfortunate, but hopefully you get the gist of everything that's going on. Hopefully you can hear us all very well. So I'm going to hand back to Philippa.
So if you were with us on Tuesday eating for the quilting questions, I started with a little joke. Well, I haven't got a joke ready for you because I'm not going to fall into the difficult thing of finding a suitable joke every time we have a live session. But we did have a little bet because Peter had gone for a long, hard run. And where is Peter this evening? He is doing a duathlon, which is 2-mile run, 10-mile bike ride and 2-mile run. And he was busy pumping his tyres up this afternoon to make sure he was ready for that. So my little kind of bet from Tuesday was, would he have cramp in the middle of the night and jump out of bed and wake me up and as well as himself, because he does that really often. And the answer is, what do you think, David?
I think he did.
No, he didn't, because I made sure that he drank loads before going to bed, and also he has some quinine medication that he can take to stop him getting cramp. However, in the middle of the night, and it's light very early, so it's maybe getting late, I put my arm out just to touch him, and he went like this. And I said to him when in the morning, when we were both awake, properly awake, I said, what was all that about? Why were you flinching when I just touched you? He said, oh, I was in the middle of this dream and I was on the loft ladder and somebody was pushing me off the loft ladder. So I apparently pushed my husband off the loft ladder in the middle of the night. So anyway, I think that we should start with the first question, but before we do, just a couple of things to say. That is my sister's birthday today, so happy birthday to my sister Stephanie. She's my little sister in that she's younger than me, but she's a good 6 or 7 inches taller than me. So so happy birthday to my sister, and also Agnes, who we're just going to see a picture of, I think, David. Agnes is my son's girlfriend. Both of my sons and Agnes live in London, and Agnes is from Romania, but today she got her British citizenship, and we've been working towards that for a long time. It's cost her quite a lot of money, and she looks absolutely gorgeous, doesn't she? And she's delighted, and now she's got dual citizenship, and so she is both Romanian and British, so she's hoping she can vote in our forthcoming election, which is a week today, isn't it, David? Yes. So yeah, so exciting things happening. Right.
About the prize,
oh yes, absolutely. Thank you. I'm forgetting all about that. So 2 prizes, always 2 prizes. Winners don't have to enter into the draw. You just have to be a member of our Garment Making with Philippa group. And I've got 2 different things today. So I've got a beautiful cotton Liberty Tana Lawn little double zipped pouch bag. So one little pouch there with lots of little separate sections in, so you could put little knitting needles, crochet needles, all kinds of little sewing bits and pieces in there. And then the other side is just one large pouch, so that's one lucky winner. And then our second prize for this evening is my most favourite needlepoint tweezers, which are made by Dritz. I absolutely love those. I have 2 pairs in the studio, and some wonderful tulip and milliner's needles, which are extra long needles. perfect for basting, particularly something like the Chanel jacket, which you might be in the middle of making. I know Sarah is, and Sarah has a question about her Chanel fabric this evening, so we'll get to that later. But
So
first question. Oh, gee, I'm not doing very well, am I?
It's because Peter's not
Yeah,
here.
Peter normally draws the numbers out, you see. He's just thrown me because he's not here. Thank you, David. So 2 numbers. So just make sure I only get 2. Thank you, David.
Thank you. Right.
Okay, and we'll let you know at the end of the session if I remember, because who knows. Right, question number 1, please, David.
Okay, so well, first of all, to say I like the idea of Peter's quinine medicine. I've got some quinine-based medicine that I take from time to time with tonic and gin included.
Ice and lemon.
Ice and lemon. So yes, and the other one was. Somebody's asking a question, Philippa. You can't wear anything without people asking your earrings. Where are your earrings from? People are admiring your earrings and saying they go very well with the backdrop.
Now I bought them at a museum in London, and I think it was the Royal Academy, but it could have been the V&A, the Victoria and Albert Museum, one or the other. I think it was the Royal Academy, and I will be going back this year to the summer exhibition, so maybe I'll be getting another pair of earrings.
Maybe some new earrings
well, I
will
just
be
have to
forthcoming.
mention my little necklace as well from I think about 1920s or 30s.
Oh, wow.
It's the same colours.
Yes. I think this is next. Anyway, my daughter actually is a designer for Next, but that isn't where it came from. So let's get on to the first question. This one came in too late for May's live, but we're going to include it in June. So this question is from Leslie Vowles, and Leslie says, I want to make the blouse that Philippa has made in the blouse class. When I've made blouses before, there hasn't been enough room to move my arms around. If I cross my arms over at the front and put my hands on my shoulders, the back is tight and it feels as if there isn't enough room in the armholes under my arms. What alterations do I need to make and how do I make them? Thanks in advance, and that's Leslie Vowles.
So, Leslie, I feel there's some kind of dance or some meditation or something with that movement there. Without any images of you wearing a shirt, it's a little tricky to say, but I do have lots of possibilities for you. And I've had a good old research of which alterations are in which classes, rather than saying, oh, Ontario, no. I actually have researched it this evening. I think the likeliest thing is that the armhole is too low, and I know this sounds counterintuitive. I've got quite a loose low armhole on this garment, but it's very gathered, isn't it? The whole thing is quite loose, and if your blouse is relatively fitted with a low armhole, it restricts your movement and you can't lift, and you don't have as much ability to really move freely within the garment, and so you need to lift the armhole to have a tighter armhole. It should be about 1.5, maybe 2 inches below the sort of your underarm, really, and mine is considerably lower than that. Okay, so that is something to check out. Now then, if you bring the armhole up, you will also need to alter the actual sleeve head as well, and there are 2 places where you can find that alteration. So let's say, I've got such a list here that one on that, the day dress. So the day dress class, which I think is about class number 5 in the series, that shows you how to lift the armhole and to adjust the sleeve head. Now it may be that you have a broad back and there simply isn't enough fabric across the back of the garment, and the alteration for that can be found in the shift dress class and in the shirt class. And if you ever want to know which alterations are where in the series of classes, go to the website, the homepage and the index, and you see all the list of alterations, and just need to click on the one you want, take you straight there. It may be that the whole kind of bust area is too small, and that is causing restricting. And if you are a fairly full cup size, you may need to do a full bust adjustment, and there is a whole video just on that. it may be that you have slightly rounded shoulders, and what happens with rounded shoulders is you need more fabric in the back. You can't have a straight back, you need kind of curve, and you need more fabric in the back to accommodate that, and the alteration for that is in the shirt class, and then we do also have an alteration for sloping and square shoulders in the dressing gown class, and there are one or two other alterations as well for prominent shoulder blades and things. So I need you to kind of really assess what's happening, look at the size of the armhole, and if it is too low, I think that is the most likely alteration that you need to find, and again checking the index for all of those different alterations, and you will be able to sort that out, I am sure.
Okay, thank you. So the next question is from Jan McKinley. And Jan says, you mentioned in one lesson a method you use to stabilise the bias seams in the skirt of a show dress, and we have a still of this, I hope. So there's the show dress. I can't remember or find this info. Please will you discuss it again in the live lesson? And that's Jan McKinley.
Thank you. So John, that is an outfit that I made as an exhibition piece actually 10 years ago this year, would you believe? So a long time ago, and it's a very heavy cotton sateen fabric. It's a kind of strappy dress with the bolero jacket over the top. And initially I was thinking that I was going to make a full circle skirt, which is exactly what it is, a circle with a hole cut in the middle, and then you obviously get a lot of fullness and drape, but the skirt is actually a circle and a half. So instead of just being a circle with a hole in the middle, the kind of on the quarter, if you can imagine a quarter circle, what I did was I slashed from the hem up into the waist and spread it even further, and had 4 panels, so it's a huge weight of skirt. I mean, the whole thing weighs a lot, and so the seams, all of the skirt seams are on a slight bias, and what would have happened if I just stitched them as you do regularly and press the seam open, that would have stretched over the time because of the weight of the skirt and the fact that it didn't have a straight grain to really support those seams. So what I did was I cut strips of silk organza. I think it was silk organza, it might have been cotton organdy, it was 10 years ago, and I cut them 1 inch wide on the straight grain. That's a very strong fabric that doesn't stretch, okay? And what I did was when I was sewing this seam, I sewed the strips of the organdy or organza into the seam as I was stitching it, and then pressed the seam open. So I had that on one side. Because the cotton sateen was a very heavyweight cotton sateen, and because the silk or the cotton organdy was very thin, you're not aware of that actually in the finished garment, and the garment was actually interlined and also lined as well, the skirt and the bodice, and so it has maintained a really great shape through lots of exhibitions and being on stands and things. It did the job really, really well. So make sure you cut on the straight grain parallel to the selvage. Okay, so that's my answer for Jan.
Okay, so I need to tee up another image for this one. So this next question is from Anne Kingdon, and let's push the image up. Okay, and there's Anne. And Anne says, I've almost finished this dress, just the hem to do. The fabric is double gauze, and this is my first time using it. I pre-washed it as recommended, but I wasn't sure if I could iron it before cutting out. I wanted to retain the nice textured surface which the iron smooths out, so I didn't iron it first, and that nice textured surface did present some problems though, in that if you don't iron it first, it sort of stretches a bit when you press the seams open. This meant that the finished garment was a bit bigger than it needed to be, and I had to take in the seams. Only of 1/4 inch on the side and the back, but it felt like I was making the whole dress all over again. I'm sure it did. If you have any experience of using double gauze fabric, I'd love to hear any tips you might have, especially to iron or not before cutting out. And just for reference, she says she used the Simplicity S8888 but changed it to a V-neck and made a new neck facing pattern. Many thanks, and that's Anne Kingdon.
Okay, and it looks really lovely, Anne, and a really great photo. Whoever took the photo did a good job, so I imagine that's possibly your husband, so just say good job there. And we can see all the detail really well, and it really suits you, but what a shame to have to take it in. I think it's really tricky, and I'll just explain a little bit, because some of the viewers might not know what double gauze is. It's generally cotton, fairly open weave fabric, and it's two fabrics that kind of stitch together in a kind of regular pattern, but the stitching together isn't visible, and some are quite flat and some are quite crinkly. For those of us that are Brits, and you'll remember it also if you're American, but in the 70s there was a craze for cheesecloth shirts. You won't call it cheesecloth in the States, but they had little collars and yokes and little patch pockets with flaps, and often Prestons or lots of buttons and long sleeves that you wore turned up. If you can think of the new Seekers, and what was that Pepsi song that they like to teach the world to sing? It's that era, okay? It looks a bit like that, but it is double, and so it's a nice cool fabric because it allows kind of air to go through it. But it does create bulk. So for example, if you were making a dress, if Anne had made a dress and she had a really gathered skirt on her dress instead of that just slightly gathered skirt, it would really kind of emphasize the fullness of the skirt because it is two layers of fabric. So you do need to be a little bit careful about the pattern that you are choosing, and you don't want anything too fitted or structured because it tends to be fairly loosely woven. So the pattern that Anne chose absolutely is perfect for that type of fabric, and I would like to hope that the skills of changing the neckline and making new faces are what she learned in the shift dress class with us. But some of the fabrics are more textured than others. It is always a really good idea to pre-wash, especially cottons, and I do understand that whole kind of should I iron it, shouldn't I have ironed it, and the problem when you press the seams that you flattened it. In hindsight, I guess the answer there was just to iron it lightly, so you didn't completely press out all of the crinkly effect, but you did flatten it a little bit. So really difficult to advise on that really, because and we've got another question later on. Things can continue to shrink in subsequent washes, and you may find that, Anne, that it continues to shrink, and if you wanted to make it a little bit more fitted again, it might be before you hem it, you know, that you could wash it again and put it in the dryer, and that might just shrink it a little bit more. The reason I say to do that before hemming it is if it shrinks sort of lengthways, then your hem might not be quite where you want it. So I just think you're going to have to be kind of guided by the particular fabric that you've bought, and what I suggest in future is that you buy an extra 10 centimetres or so and you cut a reasonable piece off and you measure it and then you wash it, and maybe cut 2 or 3 pieces off, you know, like, I don't know, if you 10 centimetres, you know, cut, you know, reasonable amount, and wash one once, wash another one twice, wash another one 3 times, press them and just see what happens. So instead of launching straight into it, do some experimentation before you actually decide how many times you need to wash the fabric, and you know what happens if you've washed it once, you iron it and then you wash it again, and so on. So that is my suggestion on that. What you could have done, and what you still could do on this, although you probably just had enough of making it, if you want to make it a little bit more fitted again, what you could do another time is that you could just unpick a little bit of the side seam and you could insert a tie belt, a half belt that just tied into a little bow or something at the back, and that would just give it a little bit more of a fitted look to it. Just bring the waist in a little bit without really altering the actual shape of it too much, and it still maintains its comfortable wearing appeal, but without all of that extra work. So that is something to bear in mind in the future. And did I write anything else down that I needed to say? I think I've covered it all, so fingers crossed. So hopefully that is of some help to you, and as with everything, experimentation beforehand, a little bit of extra fabric, and play with it before you go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Now the next question is from Jill Merritt, and Jill has been given some beautiful silk saris to look at that from a friend that she bought in India, and initially the friend asked if Jill could make her a shirt from one of them, and I've got a picture of the saris here. So there's several saris there. And then Jill says, I took one look at the laundry label and panicked, and said I thought a shirt would require more regular washing than was wise. And we've got an image of the label here somewhere, which basically says, well, anyway, you can probably read that. However, I suggested they would make stunning dresses incorporating the borders, probably as part of the skirt. Each sari is 110 centimetres by 5 or 6 metres, and costs €10 or less. Do you have any ideas for styles of dresses that would work well using a sari? And wondered if you've got any experience from this type of project from your years living in Saudi Arabia, because of course Philippa lived in Saudi for a number of years. Secondly, I would normally wash the fabric before making it into a garment, and as we've just heard, that's always a good idea. What should I do in this instance given the laundry label instructions? So Philippa, what should we do about this one?
Okay, so when I lived in Saudi, I lived there for 15 years, and when I initially went out there, and I had been prior to that working in the British clothing industry as a lingerie designer, but I trained to do everything, but I met another designer who'd done a similar course to me at the London College of Fashion. We both trained for 4 years, and we set up a business making evening and wedding dresses for expats, so Westerners, not for the Saudi ladies. And occasionally we would be given a piece of inexpensive fabric, often Thai silk was brought in to be made up into something, but also saris as well. I do think that if we have any ladies who are members who actually are do wear saris as part of their culture, it'd be really useful if they would get in touch and give us some information, because a sari, it's all pleated, isn't it? It maintains its particular shape. It isn't cut into in any way, and so that is how the actual garment is created in that sense. And I believe that 5 meters is about the average length of a sari, and so I don't know how often they would be washed really. I mean, traditionally they are worn with a little fitted short top, aren't they, with the sari over the top, and so any perspiration or kind of bodily, fluids as it were, would go onto the little top, and that would not be washed. And the sari is draped, isn't it, and then it's fitted around the waist, but it's not in contact with any areas of the body where there's a lot of perspiration, so I wouldn't imagine that they need to be washed very often. Now then, although it says silk, it may just be silk-like fabrics, or it may be a mix of fabric, and it's very hard to know. And one of the ways that you do that is by doing a burn test, and if it is silk, it will have a kind of ashy kind of residue, but if it's got any man-mades in it, it will go to a hard plastic bead or and smell quite acrid, because it could be that there are some man-mades in there as well, because that's information that you need to know if you are going to laundry it. I think it's very likely that the colour will run. I think that these are not being produced for going through a conventional Western washing machine lots of times like our clothes are, and so the fastness of the dye isn't such an issue, and so that's why it says on point 6 no guarantee for colour, and so in that sense you do want to minimise it. I mean, if you've got enough to spare, it looks like they've got finished edges all round really, but if you've got a little bit to spare, you could again do some washing tests on it and just see what happens. And it could also be that it may have some kind of a finish on it as well to give it a little bit more stiffness and swoosh, as it were, and a structure, and that washing it may reduce that little bit of body as well and make it limper, which might be something that you don't want to do. So I think there's a lot of considerations there which you've already thought about before you actually even think about a garment. But one thing we did make for a lady, and I'm pretty sure it was from a sari. It was bright pink. It was absolutely stunning. She was a Australian lady. What was she called? Sue Darling. Sue Darling. We made her an evening dress which had a halter neck and a very full pleated skirt. And I can't quite remember what the shoulders did, but the entire bodice, we did an underneath structure, so fitted underneath structure, but we bias cut strips and folded them and stitched these so they overlapped all the way down the bodice, and it came to kind of just an upper hip level. It was absolutely gorgeous, but it wasn't something that she was going to wear very often. It was so striking that, you know, she would wear it kind of not often because the people would have, oh, we've seen that one, kind of thing. And again, yes, it was fitted to the bodice, but it did have this underneath structure to really kind of hold it, because the weave might not be very strong, and if you've got anything very tight, it can start to grin and open. You know, I think I want you to have a look at a site called Eponine London, and they make a lot of beautiful dresses out of embroidered fabrics, and they've got a lovely thing on at the moment, which is a skirt and a little short top, and the skirt is pleated into a waistband, and there's a little short top that goes with it. The skirt would be perfect for this type of fabric because it's got embroidery stitched around the bottom, and you could use those different trims. So maybe gorgeous skirts, kind of evening skirts, but I'm not, you know, wear it anytime. I'm always about kind of wearing your clothes whenever, and perhaps a different fabric, and maybe just with accents of the sari fabric for a top that could be washed more often. So hopefully that will give you some help there with that, Jill. Yeah, I've got 3 to go at, so you know, the first one you're going to learn things, it's not going to go wrong, but you know what you learn you can put into the others. So perhaps start with the least favourite sari and build up to it.
Okay, thank you. Lots to go out there, so hopefully you can that's some advice from there somewhere and some options. Okay, the next question is from Sandy Went, and Sandy says, I'm making this pattern and having some fit issues. So this is the pattern she's making. It's called the Vivian top. I have cut a size 10 and graded it out for the waist and hips. I have cut a size 12, graded for waist and hips, so she's done both, and we've got a photo of I think that's the second one. I've released the back darts and it fits well now in the waist. I've also shortened the torso about an inch. I think the shoulders are too big to take up all the excess in the neck darts. Also, I need to lessen the armholes as it pulls when I move the arms, which is what we were talking about earlier on. I'm thinking of cutting out a 10 and grading out, but my question is, how in the world do I do an FBA with 2 darts in the front? Well, Philippa, is that the least of Sandy's problems, or are there other issues in there as well?
So, hello Sandy. Sandy always works so incredibly hard on her fitting and her toiles, and she does such a good job with it. I'm just going to ask David to go back to the pattern image so we can just have another look at that. Because one of the things that I really want you to do when you are choosing a pattern is really study the photograph, especially if it is a photograph and not a drawn image. I think it's really useful to see how this garment looks on a real person. So if we focus on the photograph on the left hand side, first of all, the thing that we can see is that the neck is bagging, okay, and so it's too wide, isn't it, across that sort of top shoulder chest area there. And if we look at the armhole that we've got there, we can see that that armhole is actually extending, and if we pulled the you can come back to it. If we pulled the neck so that it wasn't slightly drooping at the front, the armholes would be even further apart, okay. It's not flattering the lady in any way across the bust or anywhere else. So my first thing to say is that what you have got in your toile is exactly what we are seeing in the pattern, okay. So I think you've given yourself a kind of little battle already by you haven't done anything wrong. You've just got what they've given you, basically. They're not showing you this sleeve version. And I hesitate to say this, I don't want to be unkind, but they're not showing you the sleeve version because it's not going to look fantastic because it's all too wide, isn't it? Okay. So, Sandy, you've worked really hard on it and you have made improvements. And I know that what I've just said isn't really answering your question, but can you see? I would look at that and think, let me see what else I can find of a similar style that looks like it is doing a more flattering job to the person that is wearing it. However, what's hard to see on the pattern image is that there is a dart that comes from the neck and it angles out towards the bust point, and then the dart finishes above the bust point, okay, and it's kind of looking a bit pokey, Sandy, okay, and then there is full fabric, and then below the bust and down towards the hem is a further dart, and that doesn't go all the way to the hem, it does stop short. But my suggestion to you is, Sandy, is that you make this front in 3 panels so that you extend the bust dart down and you join it to the dart that goes below the bust, and then even take it down to the hem, or you could stop it actually, but I would take it down to the hem, and then you will have a kind of princess seam that will allow you to add fabric or extra fabric over the bust. So this piece that goes like this, you will be able to add extra fabric over the bust on both the side panels and the front. That is how I would approach it. I think that you'll be able to nip out a little bit from the excess in the upper part of the garment. I wouldn't take it from the centre front, I would nip a little bit out from the sides, and then you need to recut the armhole and lift the armhole, because that armhole is finishing way beyond where it should finish for that style of sleeve, okay. So hopefully that is going to help you, but just to reiterate, look at what's happening on the image and see, is this what I want to create, and then choose. Okay, thank you, David.
Okay, thank you, Philippa. So hopefully you can pick some bits out of that, Sandy. The next question is from Kathy Wright, and there's an image which goes with this. So Kathy is making this dress, and Kathy says, I chose to use the bust measurement size 18 and shortened the bodice and graded the waist and hips for me, but the bodice was far too voluminous. The sleeves are unusual, a bit like dolman. I know I should have toiled it, but I didn't. It would have been wrong anyway. Okay, she says my upper bust is 35, my full bust is 39, my waist is 31.5 and hips 37.5, and my height is hardly 5'3" now. My daughter said I should make this, but I think there's too much dress for me. I usually wear shift dresses in the summer, but I'm prepared to try it. She suggested the penny dress by SOI, which is what we've got a picture anyway, so we'll have a look at that. The penny dress, and I thought the circular skirt, no way. However, I've made two now. I even got a compliment from a waitress in a cafe at 71. Well done you, Kathy. And Kathy says, still sewing after finishing your course a while ago and loving it. And then she says mostly, and I know what that means or what that feels like. So we'll put the penny dress up. But Philippa, what advice have you got to give Kathy?
Okay. Right, okay. So, well, I think everybody should be getting compliments at whatever age. And if I live to 101, I'm hoping that I'm still going to get compliments. Actually, which reminds me, we just went to, there was an unveiling of one of my husband's sculptures at the National Arboretum, and I bought this amazing pink straw hat bright fluorescent pink, it was massive hat, and it did kind of make the outfit. And somebody rushed up to me and said, "Oh, hello, who are you?" Like I was going to be somebody famous because I was wearing this hat. Anyway, yes, it's very true that what you wear really makes a difference, and that you can kind of encourage conversation by wearing bright colours and fun clothes. Right, David, please could we just go back to the image that you just showed us?
Okay, so.
Okay, so Kathy, we don't know what fabric you used to make this dress, but if the fabric was fairly thick-ish, it is going to feel like a lot of dress. Now, this kind of refers exactly back to what I was saying about Sandy's top. Look at the pattern and look at this, what this lady looks like wearing this dress. Now, we know she's really, really slim, isn't she? She's going to be super, super slim. And what you can see is that the actual bodice is not fitted. There's quite a lot of bodice there that is standing away from her actual body. So what we know, so we're just going to flip back to me, David, and then we will go back again. What we know is that in this pattern there is quite a circumference of actual bodice there, and what you could do is you could measure the pattern and just see how much ease there is and compare that against your body measurement. There will be quite a lot. Now, David, we could just nip back to the actual dress again. Now, what I think you can do with this to sort it out, and I think it will be really easy, well, not really easy, but not difficult, but a little bit of work. I'm going to get you to take the skirt off the bodice, okay? Take the skirt off the bodice and try the bodice on and adjust. Sorry, can come back to me. Sorry, thank you, David. Adjust the crossover so that it crosses more and it makes it snugger. That is going to make you feel a bit more comfortable because you are 71. You've told us it's not going to be as low. It's going to take it a little bit higher in the neckline. It's going to make it a little bit more fitted, and you can easily make the skirt fit that bodice by pleating a little bit more. Okay, so the back will probably stay the same, okay, but the pleats in the front you will need to just increase. So let's just say, for sake of argument, you cross it over by an extra 2 inches. That 2 inches, it looks like you've got 6 pleats there. You need to distribute that amount. Well, you don't have to distribute it equally, but you distribute that amount across the 6 pleats and then sew it back together, and it will be much more fitted, okay? So that is what I would do with it. You do have another option, which you could do, is you could sew, and not too tight, but just to pull it in a little bit. You could sew a little bit of elastic into the waist seam just to bring it in. So you don't want to suck it right in, but just to bring it in a little bit. But I don't think that would be as successful as whipping the top off the bottom. So I think that's perfectly fixable, and then you will really wear it. And I think it's really lovely. You could dress it with a lovely brooch, put a little scarf over it or under it. Really, really nice. So can we now see the penny dress, please, David? Yes. So this is the dress that Kathy has made twice because her daughter is clearly her stylist. And it's quite similar, isn't it? But that does have elastication at the waist. I had a look at the pattern. It is elasticated at the waist, and so it is doing that job of just pulling things in a little bit and making it a little bit more fitted. So I think that you can fix it all, and we await to hear how it all goes. So thank you, Kathy.
Okay, so the next question, actually there's a comment. Sandy's come back and Sandy said thank you for your answers. She did see that the front of the pattern was not that flattering, and she said, I was trying to find a pattern with the neck darts and I had it in my stash, but she's going to bin it. Thanks for your help. So I feel really bad now for you, Sandy.
Oh, no. No, I don't want want you to pin it. What I was trying to do by saying that was to give you more information for the next time you choose a pattern, but also to say to you, it's not you. It's not you. You have made exactly what you've been presented with. Nothing to do with your sewing skills or your fitting skills at all. But you were slightly disadvantaged with what you were presented with. And so what I'm saying to you is your sewing skills are really good, but that pattern made you work really, really hard. So don't bin it yet. Just think about it and just give it 2 or 3 days and then decide, because you've already invested a lot of time and effort into it. Okay.
Yeah, hopefully you're not too far away from sorting it out. Okay, so the next question is from Chrissy in Wales. Christine Leonard, I think that is. And Chrissy says, my question is about the use of tailor's chalk prior to cutting out a pattern. I've noticed it is used to draw round the pattern pieces, particularly in tailoring. It's also used on the opening clips of the Great British Sewing Bee. I've never used it in this way and wonder if I should. What are your thoughts on this? Forgive me if you've talked about this in any of the classes. I'm a bit behind. P.S. I love these evenings, and that's Chrissy in Wales.
Well, thank you, Chrissy. We love that you love these evenings. We love them too. Now I haven't really addressed tailor's chalk. You will see me using it from time to time in various things, but I don't use it for actually drawing or marking around patterns. I think that when it's used in tailoring, and I have to say, did used to use it much more when I was working in industry as a designer, because a lot of our patterns were made out of card stock, and so they were much firmer, and that's true of tailoring, and certainly Savile Row tailoring, really good bespoke tailoring, and so they've kind of got an edge to the pattern with that firmer card stock than you have with tissue, and so that's partly why it's done. But also in tailoring, they're marking a lot more things on the pattern, you know, and they're marking it on the wrong side, I think on the wrong side, maybe sometimes on the right side of a fairly structured woolen fabric, and so it shows up well, because tailoring is often dark, isn't it, dark fabric, so you know these pale colours show up well, and it brushes off, it will brush off these woolen fabrics. Some things it brushes off less easily, some types of fabric it's harder to actually make it show up. I've got a kind of Chanel style tweed here, and it's impossible to get anything to show up with tailor's chalk on that, so I think that is the reason why I often use it. For example, if I am making something out of a woolen fabric, let's say I'm making a skirt, you might see me do it actually in the A-line skirt. I will mark the back of the fabric, the wrong side, so that I make sure that I'm always putting right sides together, that kind of thing, getting the correct side of the fabric on the right side, as it were, and sometimes for other markings as well. I mean, like all of these things, there are lots of ways of marking and cutting, and you should do what feels appropriate for the particular job that you are doing and what works for you as an individual, you know. So, you know, if you were making something in wool and you were struggling to get your pins to go through your pattern, then maybe tailor's chalk would be a really good way of working. So no right or wrong with that, and I think it's I can't think what the Sewing Bee, what they're actually doing with that, but the reason they're not using that in the class is it doesn't really work for the type of sewing that they're doing and the patterns that they are using. So useful to have, but by no means essential.
Okay, thank you. So the next question is from Sarah Runicles. Sarah, you were first on tonight, so I know you are avidly waiting for this.
And she's had to wait 45 minutes.
Yes, and we know Sarah is busy making the Chanel jacket. And she says, hello both, I'm all set to cut out the jacket, but the fabric is very fray-y, and I think we know what you mean. See the photo. So there's a photo here. I'm cutting bigger seam allowances, but would it be advisable to straight stitch around the pieces beforehand? I can't find anywhere in the class where you talk about neatening the seams for the lining or the outer fabric. Have I missed it? And what do you think about buttonholes? I wonder if I should do an edge-to-edge jacket because of all the floats. And Sarah says it's a boys special, by the way. Boys is one of our local shops, which Philippa talks about from time to time. And then Sarah mentions that Harrods are doing a mini Chanel exhibition in their windows this month, where you can go and touch and be in the window. And for those of you in the Facebook group, you would have seen Sarah's pictures, which she took, or which her husband took of her in the window, I think. Thank you for a fab class and all your hard work. So Philippa, what should we do with this fabric?
I was going to say, what should we do with the drunken sailor?
No.
Does that come later? Okay. So, hi Sarah, thank you for your kind words. So, you've given us a tiny little bit of fabric to have a look at here. Boys is a budget department store, which is our go-to kind of notions and fabrics and things, and always seems to come up with what we need at not a great cost. Because I don't know whether that's kind of representative of the entire yardage in terms of are there other patterns, checks and things going on in there. So that's the only reason that I kind of want to know that, talking about buttonholes shortly. I had a look at the class. I think somewhere I mentioned that it would, if you've got very frayed fabric, it might be a good idea just to overlock around the individual pieces before you actually start sewing. Preferably with a very fine overlocking thread. I don't think that I would suggest that you straight stitch around all of the edges because I think that it's going to fray up to the stitching, isn't it? And the overlocking would actually hold it better. Now, I've never seen inside a Chanel jacket, but generally a lined jacket is not, the seams, the raw edges are not finished. That's the whole point of, or one of the points of the lining, is that you don't need to do that. I can't see that, you know, if the overlocking doesn't kind of interfere with easing, that kind of thing, I can't see why it shouldn't stay in, but you can always get rid of it should you need to. So I think serging overlocking would be the thing to do. If you haven't got a serger or an overlocker, I think the next best thing with a fine thread is just to whip fairly loosely, biting a good 1/4 of an inch in, whip around the edges. Don't pull it tight, you don't want to create any kind of curling on the edge, but you will just hold the edges, kind of manipulate it as little as possible, and as you are working, place things down. I talk about in the class, be tidy with it, treat the individual pieces with respect, don't just chuck them to one side of your table, so that it doesn't get kind of overworked. So that's what I would do with that. Now, when I in the class, it's tucked away somewhere, but the trial jacket that I made, which is the kind of navy black with the rickrack trim, that had a very particular design, and I talk about positioning the buttonholes not as they were, it was suggested on the pattern, but in order to position them in the best place according to the fabric. Some places the fabric was a kind of a very flat normal weave, and some places there were lots of slubby things going on. So getting the buttonholes into the less textured areas made it much easier. From the little tiny piece that you spared us there, it looks like it's a fairly consistent weave. Yes, it is an open weave, but it looks fairly consistent, and you don't look to have any long floats going over any of the actual threads in the fabric. It looks fairly kind of even weave, even though you've got quite a lot of texture in there. So I would make 1 or 2 trial buttonholes before making that decision to see how you get on with it. Follow the instructions really carefully, because I really do hone it down to everything you need to know. Use a little bit of fray check or fabric glue on the raw edges of the buttonhole to hold them together as you are doing your hand stitching. And don't forget, I do say that it is perfectly acceptable to do a machine made buttonhole for the first stage, and I would use 100-weight silk, so that would hold it all much more securely. So that also is an option. So a bit of experimentation, but I don't think that from what I can see here, buttonholes are a no. So if you've got some fab buttons and you want to include that, I would go for it. So we'll all be rushing down to Boys tomorrow to see if we can get any of this lovely fabric, and we wish you good luck with that. So, and I'm going to London shortly, so definitely make a trip to Harrods. Whether I take the Chanel jacket with me or not, I don't know, because my husband and I are going taking bikes on the train, and whether I want to cycle around with a Chanel style jacket in my bike bag, I don't know. So anyway, I'll definitely put that on my wish list for my London trip.
Okay, so message for Philippa. We're just under halfway through the questions and nearly all the way through our time. So
I'm going to speed up.
some feedback. Rachel Gilbert says the Chanel exhibition is fab. Definitely worth it if you're anywhere near Harrods in London. So that's good. Sarah just had a very quick question, Philippa. What fine thread would you use on the overlocker for the? What would?
Yeah, I've got some really fine overlocking thread. David, be reading the next question. I'll just see if I can find it.
We'll come back on that one. Okay, so the next question, it's not really, it's a kind of half a question, and there's an image that goes with this. This is from Lynn Sear, and Lynn says, I'm just sending details of my latest project. I've just finished my loose fitting quilted jacket. Pretty much everything I make seems to end up going to the charity shop, so I didn't want to spend a lot of money on it. She used an old quilt cover, and here's the picture. I'm quite pleased with the job I've made. This will be going to the charity shop as well because the colours don't suit me, but as with all the classes, I've learnt a lot from the process. I'll have to scale the charity shops for old bedding or tablecloths for the shirt class next, and that's from Lynn Sear.
Okay, so Lynn, I want to chat to you before we finish, but now then, the thread is Gutterman and it's Scala, Skala, and it's incredibly fine overlocking thread. It's a little bit costly and you'll need 3 of those, but it's wonderful stuff. Okay, right. Okay, so Lynn, are you kidding? This is not going to the charity shop. Your job is not to feed exquisitely sewn garments to the charity shop. You are going to wear this. I quite often find that there's a garment or something that doesn't work for me colour-wise, and I change it because it's about what is next to your face, really. It doesn't matter what's happening lower down. So some kind of top, a scarf, big chunky beads, something else in a different colour will transform this for you. So please think creatively about how you dress it up rather than take it to the charity shop. It is far too good, and yeah, get scouring those charity shops.
Okay. It does look beautiful. It does look like a really lovely jacket. Okay, next question is from Hilary Plowman. And Hilary says, I notice your buttonholes on your dresses are horizontal rather than the vertical, which is the manufacturer's choice. Do you always work with your buttonholes horizontally? The thought had occurred to me that though I usually follow the manufacturer's choice, why do manufacturers choose the vertical buttonhole when they always pull? And then she says, obviously I have not purchased the blouse class, and that's from Hilary Plowman.
Okay, so Hilary, do talk about buttonholes extensively in the blouse class and also in the shirt class. And really, in an ideal world, it is only when there is a placket down the front of a garment that the buttonhole should be running vertically, because they've got to be centered in the placket. Okay, any other buttoned garment should have horizontal buttonholes to allow for that kind of tension in wear. Okay, the reason that manufacturers actually do them horizontally is it's much faster. There's just a buttonhole machine. It sews the buttonhole in a flash, and then a blade comes down and chops the hole. They can position them much more easily horizontally than having to put them in position them much more easily vertically than having to put the garment in horizontally. Okay, it's just more efficient in terms of the time it takes to manufacture. So the rule is only when there's placket does the buttonhole go down. When it is any other garment without a placket, they should go horizontally. That's what should happen. By the blouse class.
so Hilary, it sounds as if your suspicions are confirmed that actually horizontally is under most circumstances the way to go. Okay, the next question is from Maggie Warman, and Maggie says there's been a lot of disappointment in the Facebook group that the Vogue 8991 with a nice sleeve has gone out of print. Now that was the pattern which Philippa used for her jacket, which she bought a couple of years ago in preparation for doing the Chanel jacket class, and then when we finished it, we found that the Vogue has taken it out of print, and I've actually been trying very hard to find if they will reprint some for us, and at the moment I'm not having much luck. They tell me it's out of license, but I'm not quite sure what that means. Anyway, Maggie is wondering whether she could draft something similar to the curved vent, because the cuff on that pattern was actually very interesting. She says, I've already got the Vogue 7975, which has a 2-piece sleeve, and I copied that and converted it to a 3-piece sleeve, and we've got an image here of what she's done, which looks amazing. I then had to guess what was going on with the curved vent. I'm beyond my skill set here, but attach a photo of my effort so far. Could you please point out any errors or improvements? And that's from Maggie Warman.
Okay, Maggie, yes, I'm really sorry. That pattern, we just assumed that it was, because I had not bought it a long time ago, that it was still correct. David has worked really hard to try and get them to print some more, but yeah, they're not biting, are they? Yeah, they're not at all. So, Maggie, your pattern cutting there looks absolutely fab and very, very similar to the pattern. I cannot give you that pattern. I can't do it. It's not, I'm not allowed to. But the only thing that I would say to you, if we could just very quickly go back to the picture, David. So the largest pattern piece, which is the one on the left hand side that has the extension, I just think your extension is a little bit wide and a little bit generous. I don't think you perhaps need quite that much, really. It's just going to create a little bit too much bulk. So again, just position the piece that goes over it on top of it, and just see where your buttonholes are and where your buttons are going to stitch on, because your buttons are going to stitch onto that extension bit. And so if you can just reduce the width of that a little bit, I would do so. But other than that, it looks fantastic, and Vogue needs to employ you as a pattern cutter. Okay. Okay.
I am still in communications with them, but the first communication which we managed to get from them was that it was not. I offered to buy 100 patterns and sell them to you guys, but they're not biting, unfortunately. Okay, so that's for Maggie. Sorry, hopefully you could hear that. My microphone wasn't on, and Philippa's was, but I think you can hear me. The next question is from Pat O'Connor. What is the best way to stitch sequin fabric?
Okay, so I'm going to have to hurry up here because we've got a few questions that I'm determined to get in. So sequin fabric I have used. It is amazing. You want fairly straight styles. You don't want anything with gathers or, lots of kind of stuff going on. I remember when I was back in Saudi making another lady, Sue Durham, a fantastic pink sequined jacket. It was amazing. Now a little bit depends on the actual fabric, because the sequins can just be in areas or it can be all over sequins, but your main problem is having sequins in a seam allowance, because they don't allow you to press things and they get really bulky and scratchy and uncomfortable. So a little bit depends on what your base fabric is, but if it's a very fine fabric, then you want a fine needle and a fine polyester thread, definitely polyester thread, but you want to be removing the sequins in the seam allowance allowance, and it's a very time consuming thing, but if you go to the trouble of doing it properly, it is well worthwhile. Often the sequins are sewn on with a chain stitch, and if you pull the thread they will all start to unravel. You can just sort of cut the thread and take off the sequins that you don't want, but you do need to kind of secure that tail and make sure that you're not going to kind of keep losing lines of sequins. Again, it depends on the coverage, it depends on who you are as a person, but I quite often like to just cut into the sequin and remove it with tweezers so that the actual line of stitching stays intact in the seam allowance. So yeah, get rid of the sequins and you will find it much easier. You can do a French seam with very fine fabrics once you've got rid of your seam allowance. And cutting out, just be a bit cautious of your really good scissors, because if you're going to cut through plastic sequins, it can damage your scissors. You might be better to use a rotary cutter because you can change the blade if you dull the blade. So that is very quick, but hopefully that is of help to you, Pat.
Thank you. Okay, so Diane Grafton says that she got a distracting call and has only just managed to join us. Well, you can always watch the replay. It's going to be there for you. And
Diane, I owe you an email. You have just reminded me. I'm really sorry. I will get to you. You probably already know what the answer is, but I will get to you. I'm writing it down now, Diane.
I didn't know that was the case, Diane. So there we go. Okay, the next question is from Jean Morrison. And Jean says, how would I do a waist adjustment on jeans? Everywhere else would fit lovely, but I would need a bigger waist, and as it's jeans, to also alter the yoke. I've searched everywhere for this specific adjustment, but I can't find one to follow. I'm trying to make jeans following your online course, which is fab.
Okay, so Jean, we don't know where you need the extra measurement on the waist. Is it at the front? Is it at the sides? Is it at the back? Is it kind of all over, all round? So that is the first thing that you need to determine, and you also need to determine how much extra you need to add above the kind of upper hip measurement. And so let's imagine that it's all round. You would do a little bit of a full tummy adjustment, which you do have in the jeans class, and that is adding extra in the circumference but also a little bit in the rise of the jeans. For the side seams, instead of sort of scooping in like so, you would just take them straight up, and the center back seam, so there's the curve for the crotch and then it angles up, you need to come out a little bit and give yourself a little bit of extra fullness there. So there are several places where you can add, and if your jeans has got a yoke, you could also just slash from the waist down into the yoke a little bit and just open that out a little bit to gain a little bit of extra fabric there. So several places. Have another look at the alterations. Do talk about kind of reducing the waist, and obviously if you want to add to the waist, you're going to do the reverse of that. Hopefully that will help you.
Okay, hopefully we're still going. My PC just crashed, which hopefully hasn't impacted your ability to view this, but we're going to keep going anyway while I try and get that booted again. Next question is from Jill Boone, and Jill says, I'm totally new to the dressmaking series, but I've loved your quilting series, Philippa. My question is very basic. I made a pair of pants in linen cotton blend for a friend, and I pre-washed and dried the fabric. I made the pants, she washed and dried them, and they shrunk another inch in length. How many times can fabric shrink? I told her not to dry them again in case they shrink some more, but I thought the pre-washing would handle any shrinkage. Any thoughts on that, Philippa?
Yeah, that's really frustrating, isn't it, Jill? And you will have worked really hard on those for your friends. I'm really sorry about that. I mean, I do think that we do tend to overwash and overdry our clothes, and it kind of knocks the stuffing out of them apart from anything else, and they don't last as long. I never personally use the dryer unless I'm absolutely pushed for needing something dry. I don't put stuff in the dryer because I do think that it encourages shrinkage and it is very harsh. I mean, all that lint that is in your dryer is your clothes, isn't it? Okay, so Yeah, I mean, you would have thought washing once that it would be sufficient, but we talked, didn't we, about the double gauze fabric and the crinkly nature of it, and depending on the type of fabric it can continue to shrink. So you probably gave it a cool, gentle wash, and then it probably got a much hotter wash and a drying in the dryer, which has increased further. So again, it's impossible to say because every single fabric is different, but a conversation with your friend before you make her anything else, and maybe a second wash. Really sorry.
Okay, so we've got 3 questions left. They're relatively short questions, and then we will be announcing the winners of the draw. So the next question is from Pam Matthews, and Pam says, I've been wondering about where you can put a zip in the dress other than the back. I'm having trouble undoing zips at the back now, and I wondered if they were put in the side. Can you still get them on okay? So that's a really good question, Pam. Philippa, what do you think?
Okay, so Pam, the class for you is the day dress class, which I believe you have in your library. There is a zipper in the side seam, and that makes life much easier. The only thing that I need to tell you, that whenever you put a zipper in the side seam, the opening at the neck must be sufficient to get your head through. So you can't have a high neck that you can't get your head through. And I addressed that in the day dress. That's made David chuckle. I addressed that in the day dress class, and we chat about it. So please watch that class. All your questions will be answered.
I just have visions of people getting stuck with their either with the dress on and not being able to get it off, or trying to pull it over.
Remember when you were a little kid and people knitted your jumpers, and they were kind of okay for one winter, and then the second one, your mum would pull them over your head, your ears would be burning. Do you remember? Did that not ever happen to you, David?
No.
Oh my God, it was hell. I used to love to wear them.
Okay, so the next question is from Linda Paris, and Linda says, how far apart should stitches be, herringbone, picking up 2 threads on a flat dress hemline that is overlocked? I've just made a dress using your cotton lawn method for facings, plus your pressing techniques throughout. It looks fab. Big thank you for helping me improve at dressmaking and enjoying the whole process. And that's from Linda Paris.
Oh, that's really lovely to hear. Thank you, Linda. Glad to be helping you because you have really great sewing skills. Okay, herringbone stitch. I think it depends on the garment, really. If I am making something and I've overlocked the hem and it's just a cotton dress, I don't do herringbone stitch. I just do a slip stitch, and probably between 1/4 and 3/8 of an inch apart each of the stitches. I think it's not necessary to do a herringbone stitch for that, but if I was making something really special like a wool skirt, then I might go to the trouble of doing a herringbone stitch. Gives nice movement. A thicker wool fabric, you've got 2 little bits of stitch that you're seeing, it's less noticeable, and again probably the total stitch with the cross of the herringbone stitch and the gap would be about 1/2 an inch or so. But I think it's very dependent on the garment, the weight of the fabric, and no right or wrong with that. So as long as it's secure, whatever you feel is good, really. Okay, so go to it, Linda.
Thank you. So the next question is from Hilary Plowman, and Hilary says, when cutting pattern pieces out individually, how do you determine the straight grain in the remaining fabric?
Okay, so depending on what I'm doing, I might write on the selvage or put arrows, especially if it's a directional fabric, using tailor's chalk. So I would tend to do that on both selvages before cutting out if I felt that I wasn't going to remember. And it can be tricky. Now, with my quilters, it's really easy, and I say to them, if you haven't got a selvage on your fabric, when you stretch it and you stretch parallel to the selvage, you will have the least stretch because that's the strongest grain for the weaving, and if you stretch the other selvage, and you can see it in this fabric here, you will have a much greater stretch. So this is a slightly textured crepey polyester fabric, and so very little stretch on the grain parallel to the selvage, much more stretch on the other grain, but it isn't quite true of all fabrics. So I've got a linen here, a very nice printed linen, and when I stretch this parallel to the selvage, there is little stretch but it's very similar on the other grain. So it's directional because of the print, but would it really matter on small pieces if it was cut in the opposite direction? Apart from the print, probably not. And then this is the Chanel type Linton's tweed. That is the selvage. Very little stretch parallel to the selvage. Bit more stretch on the other straight grain. So your best way of knowing is by pulling it, but doesn't always work with garment making fabric, so a good idea to mark your selvages in some way before you start. So hopefully that will help you, Hilary. And now we have our 2 lucky winners. Okie dokie. And so what were we doing about who gets what, David?
Oh, I haven't allocated. So the first one will get the bag, and the second one will get the needles
and the little tweezers. So you notice how I gave that tricky job to David. We kind of discussed it before, but we didn't kind of work it out exactly. So Rosemary Payne, you are the lucky winner of the beautiful Liberty Tana Lawn double zipped bag, and Anne Park, you are the lucky winner of the Milliner's needles and the little needle point tweezers. So congratulations to both of you ladies. David will be in touch. So brilliant questions. I know I answered some of them in depth and others less so. So the answer there is get your questions in early. The sooner you get your questions in, the top of the list, they get further to the top of the list, and so they'll kind of get a little bit more. Not that I felt that I skimped on any of the information that I gave you on the other things. So, and if you want more explanation on a question that you feel I didn't answer fully, send it in again and it'll get to the top of the list. So David, anything else we need to chat about?
That's it for now, I think.
I can't think of anything else. So
we're at the show. We're at the quilt show, so that might be worth mentioning.
Yeah, so Festival Quilts, which is at the beginning of August, we'll be having a stand there in our usual place, which is in the Quilt in Action section between the 2 main halls. We look forward to seeing some of you there, but we've got another live before that happens, so we will remind you. So congratulations on all your wonderful sewing. Thanks for all your brilliant questions, and they really were really great questions. Thoroughly enjoyed answering them, found it really, really interesting. So you can catch up with the live anytime you like. Lots of you have got lots of classes in your library that you still have to delve into, so don't forget that resources there and that index on the homepage for all your alterations. So from David and myself, until we see you next month, have a wonderful time. Lots of sewing, lots of gardening, lots of watching football, lots of fun things, and we'll see you soon. So from David,
bye-bye.
And from me, take care everybody. Bye bye for now.